On this sixth night of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, we told Almighty Yahweh for bringing us to this point in the feast where, still keeping in mind the fact that this is a memorial occasion, but now we've reached that point in the memorial occasion where we can take great comfort and joy in knowing that Yahshua has risen. So at this time, dear family, let us stand. Almighty Father, we come before you ever so humbly on this night, giving Todah and hosannas unto your Kodesh name, for breathing the breath of life into each and every one of us, your servants, wheresoever you've scattered us throughout the world. And we ask that you continually watch over us wheresoever you've placed us. We beg of you that you please continually go before us, lead us and guide us each and every step of the way of our existence. And we ask that just as you fought against ancient Yisrael's adversaries in the days of old, we ask that you fight against ours today. And we ask that you allow our adversaries to not prevail over us, but we ask that you embarrass and smite them and humiliate them the same way in which you did to ancient Yisrael's adversaries in the form of the Egyptians and everyone else who rose up against ancient Yisrael. And we beg of you also that you please, in these latter days, give us a heart and a mind to desire to do your will and to be filled with your Ruach HaKodesh. And we ask of you that you please order our steps and our conduct aright in such a way that upon receiving your Ruach HaKodesh, we do not grieve you and compel you to take your Ruach from us. But we ask also at this very hour that just as we ask of you to Baruch all of us who are here present, standing before you and watching and viewing online, we ask also that you Baruch them who may not be able to stand, those who may be confined to hospital beds at this very hour. We ask of you to please hear the prayers and the cries and the petitions being made on their behalf, and even hear their own personal groanings, Abba Yahweh, and we beg of you to heal them and stand them up in the time frame and the season in which you see fit. We beg of you also that you please order our steps aright and make us to live pleasingly before you in such a way that in the day of judgment, we're able to be presented before your Baruch throne and to see your Baruch face in peace and hear you say unto us, well done, my tough and faithful servants. Enter thou into my rest, prepared for thee from the foundation of the world. Abba Yahweh, we ask these things of you ever so humbly, yet fervently and sincerely, in the name of Yisrael's Redeemer, Savior, and soon-coming King, Yahshua HaMashiach, we pray. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Dear family, you can feel free to take your seats. This evening, I want to open up this portion of our sixth night of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. I want to open up reading out of the book of Yeshayahu. I want to read from the book of Isaiah, chapter 53. Who has believed our report? And to whom is the arm of Yahweh revealed? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant and as a root out of a dry ground. He has no form, nor comeliness, and when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire. He's despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he has borne our griefs and has carried our sorrows. Yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of Yahweh, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquity. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. And all we like sheep have gone astray. We've turned every one to his own way, and Yahweh has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed, and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before his shearers is dumb, so he opened not his mouth. He was taken from prison and from judgment, and who shall declare his generation? For he was cut off out of the land of the living. For the transgression of my people was he stricken. And he made his grave with the wicked, and with the rich in his death, because he has done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth. Yet it pleased Yahweh to bruise him. He has put him to grief. And when you shall make his soul an offering for sin, he shall see his seed, and he shall prolong his days, and the pleasure of Yahweh shall prosper in his hand. For he shall see of the travail of his soul, and shall be satisfied, and by his knowledge shall my righteous servant justify many, for he shall bear their iniquities. Therefore will I divide him a portion with the great, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he has poured out his soul unto death, and he was numbered with transgressors. And he bare the sin of many, and he made intercession for the transgressors. We told Almighty Yahweh for the sacrifice of his son, Yahshua HaMashiach, as well as the intercessory prayers in which his son, Yahshua HaMashiach, made for all of us, the transgressors of Yisrael, as well as even his mercy or his hasid that he extended unto the Gentiles and allowed salvation to even be extended unto them. We told Almighty Yahweh for that sacrifice, as well as for his resurrection and the infinite mercy that he bestows unto all who call upon him in spirit and in truth. Tonight, Yisrael, for those of you that's got pad and pens ready to jot this down, tonight's message, finding peace, even under pressure. And we're going to talk this evening about the need. This message is going to tie into every other message that went forward from this pulpit, from this congregation during the feast. Because as Zakane Daweed asked the question on yesterday, the one recurring theme or the one common thread between the first Passover and the last Pesach that Israel had Yahshua in their midst. And the answer was the stress and the pressure that was placed upon the nation to keep the Pesach, to keep the feast at that time, at both of those times. And we here in these latter days, if we really paying attention, if our level of discernment is where it should be, if we open our eyes and see it, we got our own levels of pressure and stress and strain to keep Yahweh's feast. Pesach, unleavened bread, even all the way on up to Sukkot every year. If we've been paying attention and if we all were to just take the time out to just testify, even in our own lives, individually, as well as put our stories together collectively, we'll notice the pressure has been increasing each and every year. And we might as well be real. As they say, we might as well keep it 100. The pressure is going to increase each and every year for us to keep the Pesach from now until the wicked kingdoms of this world are destroyed and Yahshua HaMashiach returns to trample all of them underfoot and to establish his Father's kingdom. But tonight, we're going to talk about the need to find peace, even under pressure. And we're going to also go through, I ain't even got a lot of scriptures for you tonight, so you won't be doing a whole bunch of writing. Most of what we're going to discuss this evening, the layout, is coming from the book of Jasher. We're going to look back just prior to ancient Israel being delivered. We're going to go back over some other aspects of pressure that was applied to the nation of Israel. And also how there was the faithful and the steadfast in Israel who, even in the midst of all of the pressure that was being applied to the nation, they kept their faith. They maintained their belief and their confidence in what the servants of Yahweh, Moshe and Aaron, were telling them that Yahweh was going to do for Israel. Then we're going to also look back and we're going to also see that there was some among us that were just good and wild, off the hook, good and crazy. Just as we mentioned those Hebrews that jumped the gun with the whole 2019 and the year of return and all of that. We're going to go back to the book of Jasher and we're going to see that there was some amongst Israel, even in the time of the Exodus, in the days, or in the weeks and years leading up to the Pesach. There was some in Israel that jumped the gun and they knew what was written in the books and what was foretold in the history. This is it. This the time. Yeah, this time for us to go. And they jumped the gun. They left Egypt early. And Yahweh punished them for it severely. But we're going to get to that before this lesson is over. But what I want to do, I want to turn everybody's attention to the book of Hebrews. We'll go right in here into Hebrews 12:1 because we're going to find something very interesting in Hebrews. Some instructions. And one particular aspect of the instructions is very crucial for anybody that's really trying to find or maintain their sense of peace during the time of pressure. Let's go here to Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1. Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses. So in other words now, It's not like you ain't got no predecessors. It's not like you going through some things that nobody else in the world has ever gone through. It's not like you going through pain and afflictions and sufferings that nobody else in the history of man in his relationship with Almighty Yahweh has not experienced. So all of the patriarchs and the matriarchs of old, the prophets, the Nabaim, the apostles, all them who walk with Yahshua, all the writings that they left on record for us, they compose this great cloud of witnesses that we are compassed about. So whatever it is you're going through in life, whatever ordeal is weighing you down, whatever pressure or anxiety has you in a bind or bent over a barrel, somebody in the scriptures went through it and wrote down what they felt, what they were grappling with, what they did, how they trusted in Yahweh continuously. And also, more important than all of that, they also wrote down for us how Almighty Yahweh delivered them and brought them out of whatever it was that they was going through. So we ain't got no excuse for doubting, wavering, questioning Yahweh, or being skeptical of whether or not he's going to deliver us in these latter days. But this feast here is a reminder, it's a memorial of how we are to continually look back annually over what Yahweh did for our forefathers. So wherefore, seeing we also compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that's set before us. So whatever it is that's weighing you down, the weight of whatever sin it is, whether it's the sin of doubt, skepticism, any violations of Yahweh's Torah, disbelief, anything, disobedience, whatever the weight of that sin is that's weighing you down, that's prohibiting you from running this race towards salvation with patience. Gotta drop it. Gotta let it go. And every time I read this verse, I'm often reminded of the worldly movie and the scene from Forrest Gump. Anybody's ever seen the movie Forrest Gump, they can remember how as a child, Forrest Gump had a disability that prohibited him from walking properly, and he had all of these metallic fixtures attached to his legs so that his legs would extend and they would enable him to stand up straight. And you could always hear the noise whenever he entered the room. You hear all of the clanking and the machine and everything, the metallic fixtures, you hear all of that rubbing together. But then there was one scene in the movie where the little boys were teasing Forrest and they were getting ready to jump him and beat him up, and they hit him in the head with the rock. But Forrest had to flee. But with the machine, with the clamps and the braces on his legs, he couldn't extend his legs like he needed to run. But it wasn't until Forrest tried to run with all of this metallic garbage all on his legs, it wasn't until he tried to run that he ended up running out of all of the clamps, the joints, the braces, and everything. Then when he shook all of that stuff off and all of the joints and the fixtures started breaking and popping along the roadway, then suddenly Forrest could bend his legs, he could extend his legs like he needed to, and next thing you know, Forrest was in the wind. That's how we had to do with sin and iniquity, whether you got friends or family members over here in your ear casting doubt on trying to sway you or shake your faith and your belief in the name of Almighty Yahweh, all those different things, whether it be family members that hate Yahweh and Yahshua, trying to compel you to do the same, and they want to weigh you down and want to cause you to walk off and turn your back on Yahweh. You got to shake all of that. Got to let all of that stuff go. Cast it all aside. So this race that we're running for the salvation of our souls, we can't hurry this up. We can't be like the children of Ephraim in the days of Moshe coming out of Egypt. Can't be like them. We can't jump the gun. Can't do this and fast forward and go ahead of Yahweh on this one. We got to run this race at the pace in which Yahweh set. And the pace that Yahweh set for us to run at can be found all throughout his word of prophecy. We ain't going to jump the gun in no way, shape, or form. We ain't going to do like some which I've seen in Yisrael in times past, where I've seen some, oh, this is the post-judgment era. It's like, post-judgment? What? Like, so what happened to the mark of the beast? What happened to the battle of Armageddon? Gog and Magog, what happened? Just it was 2007, 2008. A sect of Yisrael just to say, hey, look, post-judgment era. With so much judgment and the winds still being held back in the land, even unto this day, being held back till the servants of Yahweh be sealed. But As we run this race with patience, we got to lay aside the weight of everything that weighs us down, the weight of all that sin. Looking unto Yahshua, the author and the finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him, he endured death, despising the shame. And in the midst of all of that, he is set down at the right hand of power. So whatever it is you feel like you're going through, if you feel like, I won't say you feel like you got the weight of the world on your shoulder, because none of us don't that feeling. None of us feel like that. None of us put to death or suffering anything for a whole nation's disobedience. So whatever pressure you feel like you got on you, or whatever you feel like you got to stand up under, look to Yahshua and put yourself in his shoes. And compare what you're going through with that. You want to trade? Would you rather have people who you healed, people who you fed, people who you restored sight unto, a nation while you did all these miraculous things in their midst, and they turn on you, beat you, slap you, buffet you, spit on you, mock you, ridicule you, take a crown of thorns? Now this is the most wicked aspect to me. This, outside of putting them to death for nothing, it's a different type of evil to just take thorns and thistles and actually go to a bush and form and twist and intertwine all those different thorns and fashion them into a crown. And then you place that upon a man's head. And one or two thorns is enough to get your attention and make you want to go to the opposite side of the street from whatever it was that just pricked you. But here, it's a different level of evil. You take a bunch of them and you fashion them all together, and to make mockery of an innocent man, slam that thing down on his head. Hail, the king of Yahudim! You make mockery of him. Then you put him to death. And then you put so much pressure on him, you get so many people to ridicule him that his own followers jump up and abandon him and forsake him and flee from him. But whatever it is you're going through, you look to him, the author and the finisher of our faith, who Yahweh allowed to sit down on the right hand of power. For consider him that endured such contradiction of sinners against himself, lest you be wearied and you faint in your mind. So whatever it is trying to break you down or chip away at your faith and confidence, before you let it break you down and you cave under the pressure of it, before you even go that route, consider Yahshua, the man completely innocent and blameless before all the world. But yet you got sinners, you got the wicked, the vile, you got liars, and all sorts of other manner of wicked people rising up against the man who's ultimately Almighty Yahweh in the flesh. But then the devil jumps into people and make them lie. Oh, he's a glutton. He's a wine bibber. He's socializing with the harlots. But yet, the man had no guile. The man had no sin. The man had no iniquity. But sinners rose up against him to put him to death. So whatever it is that weighs us down, let us consider Yahshua and what he went through as we endure our trials and our afflictions. And when looking upon Yahshua and knowing what Yahweh appointed him to do upon his second coming, just knowing what his job and his role is when he returns to this earth, if you can't find peace in knowing that when he returns, he's going to overthrow everything that afflicts Yisrael as well as this world, if you can't find peace in knowing that that's his purpose when he returns, I don't know what else is going to help you find shalom. It goes on further here in the book of Hebrews. It says, you've not yet resisted unto blood, striving against sin. So in other words, even with all that we're going through, ain't nobody tried to kill you yet. Nobody stuck a gun in your face and told you, hey, call upon the name of Yahweh one more time, I'll blow your mouth off your face. Nobody stuck a knife to your throat. Nobody's threatened you with beheading or decapitation for praying in the name of Yahweh or keeping the Shabbat or the feast days. Nobody's done it. But now let's not be foolish enough to think that we don't have to face the possibility of those days in the not too distant future. But yet at this time, we haven't endured unto blood just yet. So let us keep that in mind as we go under all of the trials and the pressures and everything in which we're grappling with. But I mentioned earlier, I read in the book of Hebrews about how you got to lay aside the weight and the sin which does so easily beset us. I want to go to the book of Jasher. For those of you that got it at home, you can feel free to jump on in here. We're going into the 80th chapter of the book of Jasher. I'm going to jump around a little bit. But for this particular point, I want to highlight the fact that we often read in the King James Version of the scripture, or we often hear the world mention about the plagues that was befallen upon Egypt. But the one thing that they hardly ever mention or talk about is the fact that during those 3 days of darkness, there was people, just as the prophets and the ministers and the messengers today have to fight with some in Israel that are rebellious and hard-headed and stiff-necked. There was some in Israel in that day, same way, rose up against Moshe and Aaron, would not obey the commands, would not obey what Yahweh was telling them to do. But the most interesting thing took place. In the midst of Egypt being smitten with 3 days of darkness, Yahweh allowed all of them to die. All of them. Can you imagine that, Brother Mike? Imagine whatever number of Hebrews you can think of. And just imagine a fraction of them, whatever the fraction is. They just refuse to obey the messengers or the word of Yahweh. And they just going and doing their own thing. They bow down before all the pagan images and the idols and everything. They refuse to keep the Shabbat. They refuse to eat according to the Torah and anything else. But then suddenly, over 72-hour period of time, they all drop. They dropped dead faster than the 90 people that was killed that witnessed the Kennedy assassination. But then, ancient Yisrael, in the midst of the 3 days darkness, while the whole nation smitten with darkness, nobody can see. But yet, Yisrael was able to see and locate these bodies and put these bodies in the ground so that Yisrael would not be the laughing stock of ancient Egypt. And give me 1 second while I go here into the book of Jasher and find that for you all. Here we go. Jasher. I'm in the 80th chapter of the book of Jasher. For those of you at home that have it, I'm starting here at verse 36. And Yahweh sent darkness upon Egypt, that the whole land of Egypt and Pathros became dark for 3 days, so that the man could not see his hand when he lifted it to his mouth. Now that's serious. The land so dark, you put your hand up to your mouth. Imagine for the gluttonous or for the slow bellies or those that just love food. Imagine you sitting there at the table, you eating, you chowing down, but then it gets so dark all of a sudden. That fork full of food that was getting ready to go to your mouth, or that spoonful of food that you was getting ready to raise to your mouth, it's so dark now you can't even so much as direct your hand to your face, right in front of your mouth. And at that time died many of the people of Israel who had rebelled against Yahweh and who would not hearken to Moshe and Aaron and believed not in them that Yahweh had sent them. So you had the gainsayers, you had the disputers, you had all the so Yahweh only dealing with y'all. So you must believe Yahweh sent y'all to deliver us from under this hard bondage of these Egyptians. You want me to believe that? Yeah, okay. All right, I'm going to go on over here and do what I've been doing. So those people, the rebellious that rose up against Moshe and Aaron, Yahweh allowed them to be put to death. Yahweh allowed them to die. And those who had said, we'll not go forth from Egypt, lest we perish with hunger. So you had these people, they're going to stay there. They're going to suck the tit of the beast. They're going to stay there. We ain't going nowhere. We follow y'all. You talking about Yahweh going to take us out of Egypt. And y'all going to take us in the wilderness somewhere and we be done died. Ain't nobody going with y'all. We're going to stay right here where everything's good. We're going to keep right here. They're going to shine our shackles next week. They're going to give us a little bit of scrap. We might even get some more straw to make the brick faster. Who knows? But we ain't going with y'all. So we will not go forth from Egypt, lest we perish with hunger in the desolate wilderness. And those who would not hearken to the voice of Moses. And Yahweh plagued them in the 3 days of darkness. And the Israelites buried them in those days without the Egyptians knowing of them or rejoicing of them. You know, the Egyptians would have had a field day. The Egyptians, had they known that, in the midst of all of the plagues that befell Egypt prior to the darkness, then they look up and realize, oh man, we can't see nothing but them Hebrews dying. You could just imagine the conversation and the tone and the sentiment of Egypt. Oh, wow. Especially Pharaoh. Oh, so you want me to let you go 3 days journey into the wilderness to serve an Elohim who is now in darkness killing some of y'all. Really? Is that what you want? Really? You mean I ain't treating y'all like that? Come on now. You can only imagine. But yet, in the midst of it, Yahweh smote the Egyptians with such darkness they couldn't even see in front of them to raise their hand to their mouths. But yet, Yahweh allowed Yisrael to see and to bury the rebellious dead. So just as ancient Yisrael had to bury and get rid of those rebellious from amongst their camp and get rid of them, we got to do the same thing in these latter days as far as spirits like doubt, disbelief, not knowing, or uncertainty. All those different things that cause us to question Yahweh's ability to deliver us from our trials and afflictions. You got to bury that stuff. You got to get rid of that stuff. Get that far behind you. Lay all of that nonsense to the side and keep on moving, just like ancient Israel had to do the rebellious in their ranks. And Yahweh plagued them in the 3 days of darkness, and the Israelites buried them in those days without the Egyptians knowing of them or rejoicing over them. And the darkness was very great in Egypt for 3 days. And any person who was standing when the darkness came remained standing in his place. Can you imagine that? Now let's update this. Let's just say right here today in modern day Egypt, modern day Babylon. Imagine the brothers on the corner, standing around, just hanging out, just doing nothing, pushing packs or what have you, or just catcalling. Then imagine this darkness just come out of nowhere. So then it's so dark, you don't even want to move. You just stuck standing at the corner of Pennsylvania and Lawrence, or you stuck standing at the corner of Monument and Luzerne in Baltimore, or whatever intersection you could think of. And any person who was standing when the darkness came remained standing in his place. And he that was sitting remained sitting. And he that was lying continued lying in the same state. And he that was walking remained sitting upon the ground in the same spot. So brother traveling, he might be moving, getting up, getting ready to go somewhere. And then he just, man, you know what? Nah, it's all right. Let me park it right here. I don't know how long this going to last, but you know what? I'm going to sit right here. And this happened to all the Egyptians until the darkness had passed. In the days of darkness, now this is where it gets interesting now. Yisrael, you've seen Egypt smitten with all these different plagues. Blood turned to water, lice, flies, the death of all of the firstborn, hail and snow and everything. And it's even interesting here in Baltimore, they even had to stand up today and read this as we had a mixture of hail and snow earlier this evening prior to the service starting. But yet, scripture says here, and the days of darkness passed away, and Yahweh sent Moses and Aaron to the children of Israel, saying, celebrate your feasts and make your Passover. For behold, I come in the midst of the night amongst all the Egyptians, and I'll smite all their firstborn, from the firstborn of a man to the firstborn of a beast. And when I see your Passover, I will pass over you. Yeah. See, now that's peace, even under pressure. Whole nation hates you, despise you. Counselors and advisors to the king working to bring about your demise from every conceivable angle. That's some serious pressure. And you know all that Israel could do? They could do nothing but wait on Yahweh. But then all throughout this week, if you go back and you replay all of these different messages from Zakane, Deacon Reginald, and myself, you go back and review them all, you'll notice that one common thread that we all, without even planning and communicating amongst ourselves to do it that way, but we all in various ways and degrees highlighted all of the pressure and the stress that was upon ancient Israel in the first Passover, the stress and the pressure that the apostles were under to keep the Passover with Yahshua, and also the stress and the pressure that we today are still under, even this year as we keep the Pesach. But all Israel could do is trust and hope and wait on Almighty Yahweh. If you go back and you look at your life, even the short time that you may have been in this way of life, whether 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever the time frame is, and if you've been in this way of life any length of time, you should definitely be able to share some stories of stress and pressure that was placed upon you keeping the Passover at different years in life. I remember, just me personally, I can attest to a few years ago, keeping the Pesach, working the job, city of Baltimore, working for them. They had a new mayor. They had a mayoral transition. They had implemented a new system of calculating payroll and everything like that. The system had went haywire straight out the gate. As soon as they got it off the ground, folks wasn't being paid. Some was working for weeks, wasn't being paid a dime. Others was working for weeks and overtime, only getting partial payments. And then Pesach was approaching for us here in the midst of a labor dispute and a strike and everything, beefing back and forth with the mayor's office and the city hall, all those different things going on leading up to the feast, then having to bury a few family members in the weeks that led up to the feast, and then after having to bury or put away an aunt and a cousin, come in a few days later and run the service. And we all went on and we pressed on. Emma Jacobius, Akeem Daweed, myself, kept it rolling. And truth be told, in the latter days, Shaitan will apply that type of pressure to you to the point where it'll be so much, and the trials and the tribulations will come just like bullets out of an automatic weapon. It'll come back to back to back to back, so much so to the point where the most you'll be able to do is navigate and make it through one trial into the next and keep on pushing forward. Even in this very building here, this is our 10th Passover in this building. Going back to 2013, that Passover here, we was under a great deal of stress and pressure that year. We was leaving one property and we were coming here. We literally, for those that remember, they can attest to it, we literally moved out of one building and into this one in 3 days. The same distance, the same journey that the children of Israel wanted to go into the wilderness to worship Yahweh. We literally moved from one location to another in that same time frame, working in shifts and groups around the clock. Some would come in early in the morning, moving furniture and things like that. Others was working on their lunch breaks and coming in the afternoon and the midday. Others was coming in, getting off of work, and we was doing it as a team, working around the clock to get everything done. And we did it, and so much pressure to the point that when we held the Pesach service that night, certain spots on the wall in the temple, the paint still moist. But yet, we ain't let none of that deter us. We kept it moving. And I say all of that not to highlight us or to pedestalize us or put us on no great pedestal or anything for worship or what have you, but I'm highlighting those instances to serve as examples to those newly converting and coming to this way of life, or anybody in Yisrael who may be struggling with particular trials and issues right now. Keep on pushing. You keep rolling, no matter what's in front of you, no matter what obstacle is thrown your way or what's designed to trip you up. Pray and ask Almighty Yahweh to lead and guide you with his Ruach HaKodesh so that you could either sidestep the stumbling block or overcome the obstacle altogether. But in the midst of it all, do not lose your grip on Almighty Yahweh's unchanging hand. Now let's go on a little bit. I'm going to jump back to Hebrews. I'm going to go back to Jasher, but for right now, I'm going back to Hebrews 12. Hebrews 12:5 says, "And you've forgotten the exhortation which speaks unto you as children. My son, despise not the chastening of Yahweh, nor faint when you are rebuked of him. For whom Yahweh loves, he chastens and scourges every son whom he receives. And if you endure chastening, Yahweh deals with you as with sons. For what son is he who the Father chastens not? But if you be without chastisement, whereof all are partakers, then you are as bastards and not sons." So keep that in mind. Your trials and your tribulations, some of these instances, they serve as corrective measures for things in which we've done in the past, or sometimes they're also things in which our fathers and forefathers have done in the past that sin and the compound interest of it comes back upon us. But in the same vein, in the midst of all of the trials and afflictions, it behooves us to continually trust in Almighty Yahweh, no matter what. Now, leaving the book of Hebrews, I want to go back to the book of Jasher. Still want to highlight some of the things that ancient Israel had to suffer on that road to the Exodus, on that road to the first Pesach, coming up out of ancient Egypt. Give me 1 second, dear family. Going back here into the book of Jasher, chapter 69. And the king of Edom died in those days in the 18th year of his reign, and he was buried in his temple, which he had built for himself as his royal residence in the land of Edom. And the children of Esau sent to Pethor, which is upon the river, and they fetched from there a young man of beautiful eyes and a comely aspect, whose name was Shaul, and they made him king over them in the place of Samlah. And Shaul reigned over all the children of Esau in the land of Edom for 40 years. And when Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, saw the counsel which Balaam had advised respecting the children of Israel did not succeed, but that they were increasingly fruitful and multiplied, and they increased throughout the land of Egypt, Pharaoh commanded in those days that a proclamation should be issued throughout Egypt to the children of Israel, saying, no man shall diminish anything of his labor. And the man who shall be found deficient in his labor, that which he performs daily, whether in mortar or in bricks, then his youngest son shall be put in their place. Can you imagine that? You a bricklayer, you a master mason, whatever your craft is, they got you working in Egypt. And then suddenly you just have one day where the pressure that they place upon you is just so strenuous that you fail to meet the quota. And mind you, you ain't being given brick now. You got to go out. You got to gather straw to make the brick. Then after you go through the process of making the brick, then you got to actually lay the brick. And then you got to lay a certain amount of brick or block and mortar every day. And in the event you fall short one day, okay, well, he's 3 bricks shy. That 18-month-old, yeah, okay, grab that baby of his. You know where he lives. Send the officers to his house, and they snatch up the young man's 18-month-old or whatever age of the child, lay them in the wall, and go head on with the rest of the project and continue to build on top of the baby. And in the midst of all of this, ancient Israel, under all of this great pressure, and YAHWEH raising up 2 servants in their midst at the same time, telling them, I'm going to use you too. You're going to bring my people up out of the land of Egypt. But Pharaoh won't let them go. So I'm going to have to knock him down. But you all going to continue to go before him, tell him and to let my people go. And when he doesn't, I'm going to smite him. But yet, ancient Israel couldn't fast forward this. They couldn't push the fast forward button. They couldn't skip any scenes or anything. They couldn't, well, you know what? No, I don't like this part. No, I don't want my baby putting that. No, you know what? That's cool. That's harsh. I'm going to fast forward to the part where we in the promised land. I'm going to fast forward to the part where we get to see them grapes that it take 2 men to carry a whole bundle. Yeah, we're going to fast forward past all this. Yeah, you know, I don't even want to see the plagues and the lice and stuff because flies make my skin crawl. So I don't want to see all of that. So I'm going to fast forward. Israel couldn't do it. They had to know and trust and believe in Almighty YAHWEH and hold on and wait for their deliverance. And the labor of Egypt strengthened upon the children of Israel in those days. And behold, if 1 brick was deficient in any man's labor, the Egyptians took his youngest boy by force from his mother and put him into the building in the place of the brick which his father had left wanting. So if you fell short 1 brick, somebody come, abduct your child, take your child forcibly, lay them out in the wall, put them to death, put mortar and cement on top of them, and whatever the stones were that was being used to construct that particular structure go right on top of that man's baby. And then they come on along with another course of block and stone until the structure is completed. And then the saddest part, you got black people today that look to ancient Egypt and they gaze and all of that stuff and they stand in deference and they amazed by it. But yet, spirit of them rise up in you as soon as they detect you being a Hebrew. You ain't even got to say nothing or speak ill of ancient Egypt in no way, shape, or form, but just the spirit of what went on then emerges in those that follow that doctrine or that Egyptology to this day. The spirit of opposition just rise up and they can sit there. They'll invite Catholics. They'll invite the Jewish community. They'll invite any other nationality all into their land and their region. They'll accept them all. They'll let them look and gaze at all of the monuments and won't say a damn word to them. But as soon as you emerge as Hebrew, Spirit of contention automatically takes over, where you don't even know why they coming at you, but these conditions here, same mindset. And the fact that Yahweh rose up on your behalf to smite them. And the Egyptians took his youngest boy by force from his mother and put him into the building in the place of the brick which his father was left lacking. And the men of Egypt did so to all the children of Israel day by day, all the days for a long period. But the tribe of Levi did not at that time work with the Israelites, their brethren, from the beginning. For the children of Levi knew the cunningness of the Egyptians, which they exercised at the beginning toward Israel. So Levi, the priesthood, no, man, don't strike no deal with them. Don't enter no agreement with them. No, they lying. They deceitful. They gonna fraud you. No, they gonna cheat you. No, don't enter no contract with them. But the rest of the nation, y'all don't know what y'all talking about. Get out the way. Get over there. They say they're going to pay us every day. We're going to go, we're going to work, we're going to strike up a deal with them. Come on, they can't be all that bad. We came down here years ago, so everything still got to be good. But the Levites telling them, the children of Levi, telling them the whole time, don't enter into no agreement with them, don't form no covenant with them, don't you trust them. But you see where it got us, right? And going on further into this next chapter, it says, in the 3rd year from the birth of Moshe, now Moshe 3 years old now, Moses a little toddler now, what they would call him today, a toddler, walking around now. Pharaoh was sitting at a banquet when Alperanah, the queen, was sitting at his right hand, and Bethiah at his left hand. And the lad, Moshe, was lying upon her bosom. And Balaam, the son of Beor, with his 2 sons, and all the princes of the kingdom was sitting at the table in the king's presence. And this is where things get interesting. Now, early in the week, one of the messages we taught where Pharaoh had the dream about all of his counselors and everybody in Egypt being put on one side of the scale, and this kid being put on the other side of the scale, and the kid preponderating or outweighing over everything else. And this is where the unfolding and the fulfillment of that dream starts to come to fruition now. Because remember, it was this dream that set Pharaoh in motion as far as the children of Yisrael. It was that dream that Pharaoh had about the loss of his kingdom that set him in a rage to where they had to do something about those Hebrews. But now, where like all dreams, at some point it goes from dancing around in your head or being a premonition or a foretelling of future events. They all had that culmination point where eventually the dream materializes in the real world. Now, the king's men, his counselors, and everybody, they sitting around at a banquet now. So the lad, Moshe, 3 years old, the lad stretched forth his hand upon the king's head and took the crown from the king's head and placed it on his own head. 3 years old, baby. Now, this is all Pharaoh been worrying about. The whole process of reducing that Hebrew population in Egypt now. It was all about keeping his kingdom intact. But now, a foretaste of his being overthrown and replaced is now starting to materialize. And when the king and the princes saw the work which the boy had done, the king and the princes were terrified, and one man to his neighbor expressed astonishment. Now, everybody's seeing it now. Imagine a big banquet. We would use something here in Baltimore like Martin's West. Now, you take a big, large venue like that, everybody sitting around. Imagine the governors or the rulers of your region. They sitting there. They done took this child from this nationality of people, but yet they take this child thinking it is one of their own, but they raise him up in their palace and everything. But now the child's getting up some size and some age now. Everybody at this banquet, it could be State of the Union address or whatever the large government gathering could be. And then suddenly, little baby take the king's crown. Not only he didn't knock it off. Most children would just swat at it or try to pull it or knock it up. No, he took it off his head, put it on his own. So now everybody seeing it. Oh, did you see that? What the fuck? They just took the king's crown. What? I can't believe that. Did I just see that? Yeah, you saw it. It looks like that little boy took the king's crown. So now Moshe made Pharaoh a spectacle before everybody. And the king said unto the princes who were before him at the table, What speak ye, and what say you, O ye princes, in this matter? And hey, what y'all got to say about this? And what is to be the judgment against the boy on account of this act? And Balaam, the son of Beor, the magician, answered before the king and the princes, and he said, remember now, O my master, the king. Remember the dream which you dreamed many days since, and also that which your servant interpreted unto you. Now, therefore, this is a child from the Hebrew children, in whom is the spirit of Yahweh. And let not my master the king imagine that this youngster did this without knowledge. So in other words, hey, this ain't no ordinary child now. So don't just think there's just some fluke or some happenstance. Nah, that little boy, he from one of them Hebrews. One of them little troublemakers there. He got the spirit of Yahweh in him. So nah, don't think that that's just him playing around being mischievous. No, he knew exactly what he was doing. For he's a Hebrew boy, and wisdom and understanding are both with him. Although he is yet a child, and with wisdom he's done this thing, and he's chosen unto himself the kingdom of Egypt. For this is the man of all the Hebrews, to deceive kings and their nobles, and to do all these things cunningly, in order to make the kings of the earth and their men to tremble. Surely you know how Abraham his father acted, who deceived the army of Nimrod, king of Babel, and Abimelech, king of Gerar, and that he possessed himself of the land of the children of Heth and all the kings of Canaan. And that he descended into Egypt and said that Sarah, his wife, she was his sister, in order to mislead Egypt and her king. And his son Isaac also did so when he went to Gerar, and he dwelt there. And his strength prevailed over the army of Abimelech, king of the Philistines. And he also thought of making the kingdom of the Philistines to stumble, saying that Rebekah, his wife, was his sister. And Jacob also dealt treacherously with his brothers. And now he's going to run down the man's whole family lineage. And now lay it out. All of them, they just mischievous. They just troublesome. Every one of them. Abraham did this. Isaac did such and such a thing. And Jacob was so bad, he even deceived his own brother. This is essentially what Balaam is doing. Jacob also dealt treacherously with his brother and took from him his birthright and his blessing. So he's running it all down to him. And he then went to Padan Aram, to the house of Laban, his mother's brother, and he cunningly obtained from him his daughter, his cattle, and all the stuff belonging to him, and fled away, and returned to the land of Canaan to his father. So now you're going to paint Jacob as a thief. And his sons also, they sold their brother Joseph, who went down into Egypt and became a slave, and was placed in the prison house for 12 years, until the former Pharaoh dreamed dreams and withdrew him from the prison house and magnified him above all the princes in Egypt on account of his interpreting his dreams to him. So now you're going to run down the man's whole family history. Then you get to the 3-year-old. See, it's just in them. That's just what they do. They subvert whole kingdoms, all of them. He ain't no just ordinary child. No, he ain't doing this of his own without knowledge. No, the spirit of Yahweh is upon him. He's deceitful, crafty, he's cunning. It's in his DNA. Same way in which in the 1990s, the black youth were dubbed all sorts of things, namely super predators. They were said to have a genetic predisposition to crime and violence and all those different things that went on that black children had to bear the weight of being under in the 1990s and the 80s and even unto this day. Same thing. But in the midst of all of this, the relief of the pressure, Yisrael was under some great pressure. But the one who was sent by Yahweh to relieve it all, like a pimple, or like a blackhead, or like anything where pressure builds up and accumulates, there's eventually that catalyst that unleashes it all. And we're reading about Moshe now. And in the midst of all of this, Israel still had to wait, still had to endure all of the punishment, the embarrassment, the humiliation, the disrespect, and everything. Still had to endure it until time appointed. And we jump down here further in this chapter. It says here that we go on further. Balaam said to the king, jumping down further into this same chapter, let us moreover call for all the judges of Egypt and the wise men thereof, and let us know if the judgment of death is due to this boy, as you did say, and then we shall slay him. And Pharaoh sent and called for all the wise men of Egypt, and they came before the king, and an angel of Yahweh came amongst them. Now look how that works. Now Now, Shaitan does the same thing with Almighty Yahweh's people. When the sons of Yahweh or the sons of Elohim gather, Shaitan try to ease one in there as well. He try to ease the demonic spirit or one of his minions. He try to send in the midst as well. But now, Pharaoh called for all of the great men of Egypt to figure out how to handle the 3-year-old. Picture that. Now, that's some power there. That's some power. You got to go get all the great men, your prognosticators, your counselors, your advisors, your dream interpreters, your magicians. You got to go get all these people together to figure out what to do to a 3-year-old child who took your crown off of your head. So now you got to figure out how to deal with them, how to go about it. And in the midst of all of them gathering, Yahweh sends an angel in the midst of the gathering. And an angel of Yahweh was coming among them. And he was like one of the wise men of Egypt. Imagine that. Scripture tell you to be careful to entertain strangers, for some have entertained angels unaware. And the king said to the wise men, surely you've heard what this Hebrew boy who is in my house has done, and thus has Balaam judged in the matter. Now judge you also, and see what is due to the boy for the act which he's committed. And the angel, who seemed like one of the wise men of Pharaoh, answered and said as follows: before all the wise men of Egypt, and before the king and the princes, if it please the king, let the king send for men, who shall bring before him an onyx stone and a coal of fire, and place them before the child. And if the child shall stretch forth his hand and take the onyx stone, then shall we know that with wisdom has the youth done all that he has done, and we must slay him. But if he stretch forth his hand upon the coal, then shall we know that it was not with knowledge that he did this thing, and he shall live. And the thing seemed good in the eyes of the king and the princes. And so the king did according to the word of the angel of Yahweh. And the king ordered for the onyx stone and the coal to be brought and placed before Moshe. And they placed the boy before them. And the lad endeavored to stretch forth his hand to the onyx stone. But the angel of Yahweh took his hand and placed it upon the coal. And the coal became extinguished in his hand. And he lifted it up and put it into his mouth and burned part of his lips and part of his tongue. And he became heavy in mouth and in tongue, which is why in Exodus, when you go back to those opening chapters of the book of Exodus, you see Yahweh speaking to Moshe, and Moshe in his own way, making what they would call today, trying to find an out for himself or a reason for why he couldn't be used by Yahweh. And he told, I'm hard of tongue, slow of speech, stammering lips. The child stuttered as a result. He was going for that onyx stone, but that angel of Yahweh directed his hand. So no, you go here, you grab this. Yahweh placed the power upon him the way he extinguished the hot coal just by grabbing it. And in the spirit of all children, little children, they find out what things are, curiosity. So brought it to his mouth. And at the same time, saved his own life. Because the decree had already been made. If you go for that onyx stone, kill him, put him to death. But see Yahweh in the details. And then we go on further here. It says, and when the king and the princes saw this, they knew that Moshe had not acted with wisdom in taking of the crown from the king's head. So that saved his life right there. Just the angel redirecting his hand. So now it spared them. So now they went back and they was forced to evaluate. Well, you know what? Well, maybe he didn't take the king's crown out of his own will, his own accord. Maybe it was just a random mistake. You know what? Okay, think none of it. Let him live. And so the king and the princes refrained from slaying the child. So Moshe remained in Pharaoh's house, growing up, and Yahweh was with him. And while the boy was in the king's house, he was robed in purple, and he grew amongst the children of the king. See how Yahweh protected him? Now yet, Yahweh allowed the very one that he was sent there to overthrow, to raise him. Almost like what some people in the world go through as far as jobs and things like that, where I don't know if you all ever seen it, but I'm sure some of you have, where A person might be slated to go on out the door, be sent off from a company. But before they throw them out the door or they let them go, they got to train their replacement. And in the midst of them training their replacement, then suddenly they'll call out from work, or they'll come in late, or what have you, or they'll be rather disrespectful or kind of crass in the way in which they treat the replacement, or they'll give them half training, or they'll set them up in a way where, well, all right, I'm going to show you how you do this. But the whole time they're showing them things that will ultimately get them fired after they're gone. So Moshe and Pharaoh raising up the very one that would be the cause of his demise, or the one that Yahweh used to bring about his demise and overthrow his nation. Let's go on a little bit. Still moving here in the book of Jasher. But I want to jump forward a couple chapters. I want to go to Jasher chapter 75 now. I mentioned earlier how there was some that jumped the gun early. You're going to always have them. So Yahweh gives the time frame or a certain set of events which to look for as far as Yahshua's return and his coming. You're going to have some, oh man, it's this year. He coming back this year. He going to do such and such a thing. We're leaving. We're going home. This is the year. This is year 400. This is it. We up out of here. We leaving, dog. We gone. Year 400 turns to 401, 402, and so on. And then we still here. But just as we had those that jumped the gun in 2018 and 2019 is next year, we're leaving next year. Yeah, some in Yisrael that did the same thing in the days of old. Just couldn't wait. Just, man, look, this is it. It's time. Let it go. Now, we're going to jump here into Jasher chapter 75. Now, at that time, in the 180th year of the Israelites going down into Egypt. Now, that's serious. It's just, you're slated to be down there. You're slated to be in captivity 400 years. You got folk 180 some years in. No, this is it. This is the time. Y'all ain't understanding. We got to go. Got to do this. And at that time, at the 180th year of the Israelites going down into Egypt, there went forth from Egypt valiant men, 30,000 on foot from the children of Israel. Now just imagine that. Now that's just those from Yisrael. It says that there went forth valiant men from Egypt, but it only numbered those that left from Yisrael. It's 30,000 from the children of Israel, who were all of the tribe of Joseph, of the children of Ephraim, the son of Joseph. For they said the period was completed, which Yahweh had appointed to the children of Israel in the times of old, which he had spoken to Abraham. So they the one, yeah, hey man, look, captivity is over. Yahweh said such and such amount of time, and he told it to Abraham. This it, yo. This wrapping up. It's the end right here, man. It's time to go. So they had said, for the period was completed, which Yahweh had appointed to the children of Israel. It's 2019, y'all. We leaving. Time to go. Captivity is up. In the times of old, which he had spoken to Abraham, and these men girded themselves, and they put each man his sword at his side, and every man his armor upon him, and they trusted to their own strength. And they went out together from Egypt with a mighty hand. And you all gonna leave no wives, no children, nothing, just 30,000 footmen, valiant men. You up, hey, look, this is it. It's over. It's accomplished. Time to go. Then you go out, you just take your battle, you take your equipment and your armaments for battle, and that's it. But they brought no provision for the road, only silver and gold, not even bread for the day that they brought in their hands. Can you imagine that? You just jump up, you got all the equipment you need to fight. You got all of your body armor, you got your sword, you got your helmet, all of the things that a warrior or a soldier or a troop would need in battle. You don't take nothing to eat, no water, nothing. You just take silver and gold. For they brought no provisions for the road, only silver and gold, not even bread for that day did they bring in their hands. For they thought of getting their provision for pay from the Philistines. And if not, they would take it by force. So now you're all going out, a band of strong-arm robbers, if you will. You're just going to muscle whatever it is you need. You're going to shake down the people that you encounter. And these men were very mighty and valiant men. One man, and this ought to sound real familiar to everybody. One man could pursue 1,000, and 2 could chase 10,000. That's in the scripture. Scripture asks the question, how shall 1 chase 1,000 and 2 put 10,000 to flight? Now it says that these were some mighty men, that one of them could chase 1,000. Can you imagine that? You chasing down, if you was to do it in a mathematical term, militaristically, you chasing down a couple brigades. You chasing down a few police departments. One man putting all those folks to flight. Then if you got another one to join them, you chasing whole neighborhoods. You chasing down whole communities, just the 2 of y'all. That's serious when y'all was with you. And they directed their course toward the land of Gath. And they went down and they found the shepherds of Gath, feeding the cattle of the children of Gath. And they said to the shepherds, give us some of your sheep for pay, that we may eat, for we are hungry. For we've eaten no bread this day. So now you're going to run up on them. Now they tending to their own flocks, their own shepherds, their own sheep and everything else. And you're going to punk. Hey, look, let us get some of that. We ain't ate. Break bread. Hit me off with a little bit. In fact, hit all of us off with a little something. We ain't ate. You can imagine that, Brother Ed? You got your property now. I'm out walking around, me and several others, and you getting ready to cook dinner, and we tapping at the glass of your window. Hey! You open the window, you open the door. Hey, look. What that is? What's that? Hey, bring that out here to us. We ain't ate today. Let us get that. You're like, hey, man, what? It's mine. It's me, my family. Nah, hey, we ain't ate it all. Let us get that. Come on, break bread. And the shepherd said, are they our sheep or cattle that we should give them to you for pay? So the children of Ephraim approached to take them by force, and now they're going to punk them. So now they look up and realize the men of Gath, they ain't in compliance. So, all right, okay, cool. We're going to take that then. Move out the way. And the shepherds of Gath shouted over them that their cry was heard at a distance. So all the children of Gath went out to them. Just like you see the brothers today, hoo-hoo! They give the little gang calls or what have you, soo-woo, or da-da-do, or whatever it is that the different little gangs would yell out as their little call to the other members, or like they did in Cooley High when they was all in the movie theater and the brothers got ready to fight in the movie. Man, I'll kick your so-and-so and so. So you in what army? This army. Disciples! And then suddenly you start seeing folks pop up all in the theater. And then next thing you know, but counts. And then his gang, different folks stood up, and then all sorts of chaos broke out in the movie theater. Same thing here. Children of Ephraim, they gonna go out 30,000 strong. All you gonna take is silver and gold. You ain't even take enough bread to feed yourself for that day. And then you gonna go around as a band of marauders, and you gonna take. But then the people looked at me, hey man, you ain't doing that to us. So then they shouted and they called in for some help. And when the children of Gath saw the evil doings of the children of Ephraim, they returned and assembled. And the men of Gath assembled, and they put on each man his armor. So now everybody coming out to fight. Everybody heard the shout. Oh man, what? What you say? Them Hebrews? Hey boy, man, them Hebrews coming down here. Get my stuff. Hold on, honey. No, we'll finish that up later. Let me get ready. Go out here. Tear these Hebrews out. Let me do something and show these Hebrews a thing or two. So this is what's happening. Now, mind you, these are the Hebrews that said that the point of captivity, it was over. According to what Yahweh had told Abraham concerning them going down into Egypt, into a strange land. And mind, they got it in their mind. This over. Look, we being delivered from all this. It's time to go. But you ain't even got nothing to sustain yourself in your newfound state of deliverance. You can jump the gun early. Whereas had you stayed calm and patiently waited on the one who Yahweh had appointed to begin the process of delivery, was getting ready to unfold, would not have happened. And so they put on each man his armor, and they came forth to the children of Ephraim for battle. So they wasn't playing, wasn't no peace talk, wasn't no white flags, wasn't no negotiations. Everybody came out with their equipment to battle. And they engaged with them in the valley of Gath. And the battle was severe. And they smoked from each other a great many on that day. So there was some losses tallied up on both sides. And on the second day, the children of Gath sent to all the cities of the Philistines that they should come to their help. So now they look at me, okay, all right, so they came to fight. All right, so they ain't no punks, they ain't no slouches. All right, cool. Who the who? Hey, help! So they call for help. So now they send to all of the cities of the Philistines. Come up unto us and help us, that we might smite the children of Ephraim who've come forth from Egypt to take our cattle and to fight against us without a cause. And man, we didn't even do nothing to them, man. They try to come down here, they try to bring us a move. Come help us out. Bring that. Now the souls of the children of Ephraim were exhausted with hunger and thirst, for they had eaten no bread for 3 days. And 40,000 men went forth from the cities of the Philistines to the assistance of the men of Gath. Now you out starting trouble. Now you ain't even bring no food to eat and sustain yourself, but you out fighting and literally bit off more than you could chew. And these men were engaged in battle with the children of Ephraim, and Yahweh delivered the children of Ephraim into the hands of the Philistines, and they smote all the children of Ephraim, all who had gone forth from Egypt, and none were remaining, but 10 men who had run away from the engagement. For this evil was from Yahweh against the children of Ephraim, for they transgressed the word of Yahweh in going forth from Egypt before the period had arrived, which Yahweh in the days of old had appointed to Yisrael. So you couldn't even, they had a saying in the world, keep calm and do this, or keep calm and do that. You couldn't even keep calm and wait on Yahweh. You had it in your mind. Hey, look, this is it. Somebody had a miscalculation, and the miscalculation sounded real good, Ema, the way, you know how we do today, where we get conspiratorial and we get to weaving things together, and it start off sounding good, but then after a while, it's just like, to those that know, it's like, man, that don't make no sense at all. And then before long, see, look, right here, now they got 6 candles lit, and the 6 candles is meaning of 6 different cities is going to be destroyed, and the 6 means the mark of the beast. And then at the same time, you got to take into the fact that the year is divided, it's 12 months. So it's only going to be half a year because they got 6 candles lit, and half of the year, if you start in January, half of the year bring you to June. So somewhere around June the 6th of 2026, this thing gonna all be over, and it's gonna be a wrap. Because I seen it. It was in the sermon. It was there. You know how we do. You know how we do. And then the mark of the beast, they're gonna put it on everybody, and the candles, man, it's 6 of them, so it's only gonna take about $6 to make the little thing, and it's gonna put them up in them, and then the syringes only cost 66 cents to make. So when you put the 66-cent syringe with the $6 chip, 666, and then shoot them in the people. You know how we do. So this thing here that had the children of Ephraim, hey, look, this period is over, man. We supposed to be up out of captivity, man. Yahweh told Abraham this, that, and the other, and so on, so and so, and such a thing went on, and such a thing. See, bro, you got to look at it like this. See it? You know that's how it went. And then it spread throughout the children of Ephraim. And notice it didn't say nothing about any of the other tribes going out with them. 30,000 men from one tribe. Man, y'all don't know what y'all talking about. Man, y'all punks, y'all still sitting in there. Man, y'all getting all beat up and whipped up. Man, I ain't going for that. We leaving. We're going out here today. We're going to take our equipment. Man, if you were to update it today, it'd be the equivalent to the brother who might be able to afford one, putting on a little bulletproof vest on this shirt, and getting whatever little gun he think he got, whether it's 38 or 45, man, going up out here. And he go to his little stash, whatever brown paper bag he might have hidden under the mattress or in the Nike box. If he getting a little illegal money in the street, he go to his little Nike box. Man, look, this shit, I'm gone. I don't know about y'all. I'm getting low, getting up out of here. I'm gonna live off the land. But yet, the thing in which they set out to do, it wasn't of Yahweh, so as a result of them jumping the gun, Yahweh overtook them by way of the Philistines. Yahweh gave them over to it because they went ahead of him, jumped the gun. So even us, with our trials and tribulations, if we ain't being led and guided by the Ruach HaKodesh, it would be in our best interest, whatever foolish thought or silly notion that we might have in our head that we think is a legitimate instruction from Yahweh, if it ain't lining up with the Torah and if Yahweh ain't giving it to us himself, it would behoove us to do like that man that was walking when the 3 days of darkness hit. It would behoove us to sit on down and park it and wait on Yahweh. And the Philistines also, out of all of them, there fell a great many, about 20,000 men, and their brethren carried them and buried them in their cities. And the slain of the children of Ephraim, they remained forsaken in the valley of Gath for many days and years, and were not brought to burial, and the valley was filled with men's bones. And the men who had escaped from the battle came to Egypt and told all the children of Israel all that had befallen them. And their father Ephraim mourned over them for many days, and his brethren came to console him. And he came unto his wife, and she bare a son. She called his name Beriah, for she was unfortunate in his house. Can you imagine that? You done jumped the gun. 30,000 of you jumped the gun. You're going to go ahead of Yahweh. You got this conceived notion, captivity is over. This it. It's our time of deliverance. We're going to go. And then you get delivered up to an enemy that's much stronger and mightier than you. Then you do it in such a way where you bring down the wrath upon yourself because you didn't even think enough of yourself to bring your own food. And you're going to take that which others have in their possession. See, don't pay to be led by something other than the Ruach HaKodesh. Let's jump on back here a little bit, going into this next chapter some. Going over here into chapter 76 briefly. And we're going to read up on how in the midst of all of this, there was one Pharaoh to emerge. As one Pharaoh died, another Pharaoh rose, but Yahweh was rising up, fighting against these different Pharaohs also, and was knocking them down like you wouldn't believe prior to the drowning of Pharaoh in the sea. Now at this time, Jasher, I'm in chapter 76, and at this time Yahweh smote Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and he afflicted him with the plague of leprosy from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. Owing to this, the cruel treatment of the children of Israel was this plague at this time from Yahweh upon Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. So now you done took the man, stripped him of his melanin. Black man. So contextual, historic clue, people masquerading and pretending to be somewhere in the earth where they were not. Now, I ain't seen no white people get leprosy, turn black. I ain't seen no white person, the shade of Ashton Kutcher, turn dark as me. I ain't seen it. But I see black people all the time, regularly, where they are colored in melanin, but in certain spots, the hands, the neck, sometimes the face, where it's like, oh, okay, all right. Look like a little children's drawing and somebody forgot the color. Look, the little child was in a hurry, or the little child was being rushed to go play or something and didn't get to finish completing it. So it's contextual clue here. Struck Pharaoh with leprosy from the crown of his head to the sole of his foot. For Yahweh had hearkened to the prayer of his people, the children of Israel, and their cry reached him on account of their hard work. See, so prayer works. Don't ever let nobody tell you that it doesn't. Prayer works. It worked in the days of old, and if you get the right Israelites today, they can attest to the fact that prayer is still working for them. And still his anger did not part from them, and the hand of Pharaoh was still stretched out against the children of Israel. And Pharaoh hardened his neck before Yahweh, and he increased his yoke over the children of Israel, and embittered their lives with all manner of hard work. And when Yahweh had inflicted the plague upon Pharaoh, he asked his wise men and his sorcerers to cure him. So now you go to all your counselors and everything, and his wise men and his sorcerers said unto him, and this way it gets wicked. His sorcerers and the wise men said unto him, if the blood of little children were put into your wounds, you be healed. So they get to practicing, what is that word? I think it's androchrometer. I think that's the word wherein they take the blood of young children and they place the blood of young children. The people who need it or profess to need it, they drink it. I think that's the word, right? Androchrometer. Okay. Now, don't ask me to spell it now. I done seen it before. I knew the definition of it, but if you ask me to spell it right now, I might be a little bit tripped up. But I got a whole T in the back. She can probably spell it for me and break it down in more detail for you. But yeah, sorcerers and the wise men told Pharaoh, hey, look, you get the blood of some little children and you pour that blood in your wounds, man, you be all right. Get that blood. So, of course, you know where the blood came from. You know they wasn't going to the Egyptians. You know they wasn't holding no blood bank. It wasn't no, the Red Cross wasn't there passing out cookies and grape juice to the Egyptians to donate a pint of blood. So you know that wasn't where they got it from for them. And Pharaoh hearkened to them. And he sent his ministers to Goshen, to the children of Yisrael, to take their little children. Pharaoh's ministers went and took the infants of the children from Israel from the bosom of their mothers by force. And they brought them to Pharaoh daily, a child each day. And the physicians killed them and applied them to the plague. And this did they all the days. You can imagine that. You got a child, you nursing the child, you sitting right there, you breastfeeding the child, and then somebody just busts in your door. Hey, give me him. You just take your child by force at sword point. Then in turn, if you buck or rebel, you get stretched out and killed, and then your child still goes on off to meet the same fate for some wicked ruler to prolong his life, supposedly. And the number of the children which Pharaoh slew was 375. You imagine that you kill a child every day, just to extend your evil, vile, filthy, wicked life. And it still didn't help. But Yahweh hearkened not to the physicians of the king of Egypt, and the plague went on increasing mightily. And Pharaoh was 10 years afflicted with that plague. Still, the heart of Pharaoh was more hardened against the children of Israel. And you putting a child to death every day just so you could pour their blood into your wounds. And the counsel that your kings and your sorcerers give you proves to be fruitless. And it still ain't working for you. And at the end of 10 years, Yahweh continued to afflict Pharaoh with destructive plagues, and Yahweh smote him with a bad tumor and sickness at the stomach, and that plague turned to a severe boil. And at that time, the two ministers of Pharaoh came from the land of Goshen, where all the children of Israel were, and they went to the house of Pharaoh and said unto him, we've seen the children of Israel slacking in their work and negligent in their labor. So now this man dying, he putting the children to death and everything. Now, children being put to death, children being taken from their mothers and fathers to keep this man alive. But yet you don't think that's going to take a toll on your labor force. You don't think that's going to take a toll on your staff. You expect them to still meet the same rigorous demands while having their children snatched from them and murdered by them regularly. Say that again. Adrenochrome. Okay, got you. Adrenochrome is the term where they take the blood, pour it into somebody else, or somebody drinks it, consumes it. Adrenochrome. Told her. And when Pharaoh heard the words of the ministers, his anger was kindled against the children of Israel exceedingly, for he was greatly grieved at his bodily pain. Now you sick, you on the verge of death, you can barely stand up, you barely alive, you got leprosy, you got blood deficiency, you got a tumor, abscess, and other things in your stomach going on, but yet you mad because somebody else ain't meeting your excessive demands, but yet you killing their children. But then you get enough energy. That's how Shaitan works. Shaitan will take the wicked and prop them up even in the midst of their wicked and their state of decay and them approaching morbidity, getting ready to die. But yet Shaitan will still give them that last good boost of energy to execute some more evil. And when he answered and he said, now that the children of Israel know that I'm ill, they'll turn and they'll scoff at us. Now therefore harness my chariot for me, and I'll betake myself to Goshen, and I'll see the scoff of the children of Israel with which they derided me. So his servants harnessed the chariot for him, and they took him, and they made him to ride upon a horse, for he was not able to ride of himself. The Roosevelt thing. They had to prop the man up. The man was so weak, so ill, so his bodily condition was so decayed, he couldn't even get himself up to ride on the horse. So the servants had to fashion the horse and form it in such a way whereby they put him on the thing and structured it in a way where it held him in place. Even though at any given moment he could have toppled over. Sort of like one of America's presidents. But yet, he just determined, nah, okay, they're going to make mockery of me. I'm down. They're going to take this as a joke. They think it's a game. Wait till they get a load of me. And he took with him 10 horsemen and 10 footmen and went to the children of Israel to Goshen. And when they had come to the border of Egypt, the king's horse passed into a narrow place, elevated in the hollow part of the vineyard, fenced in on both sides, the low plain country being on the other side of it. And the horses ran rapidly in that place, and they pressed one another. And the other horses pressed the king's horse. And the king's horse fell into the low plain while the king was riding upon it. And when he fell, the chariot turned over in the king's face, and the horse lay upon the king. And the king cried out, for his flesh was very sore. And you can come there like a slave owner or like an overseer on a plantation. You on the verge of dying. You fighting to stay alive. You alive by that much. But then you hear, oh, they slacking? All right. Oh, they ain't putting forth as much. Okay, wait till I get out here. Take me to them. Get the chariot ready for them. We're going to go. So then they ran on the plain, and they got to a particular place where the space in which they were trying to travel through was too narrow. So all of the horsemen, they all ran around, and they fenced his horse, and his horse fell and gave way and trampled him underfoot. And the flesh of the king was torn from him, and his bones were broken, and he could not ride. For this thing was from Yahweh to him. For Yahweh had heard the cries of the people of the children of Israel and their affliction. And his servants carried him upon their shoulders, a little at a time. And they brought him back to Egypt. And the horsemen who were with him also came back to Egypt. And they placed him in his bed, and the king knew that his end was come to die. See, but yet, in the midst of all of this, the common thread, Yahweh hearing the prayers of the children of Israel in the midst of all of this. See, now you get to talking to black people today, they'll tell you about the ancestors and the ancestors moving and doing it, but the ancestors only flip over cruise ships with random white folks that ain't really directly tied to your global oppression. It'd just be some random white folk. It might be a stockbroker over here, might be a hedge fund manager over here, 2 real estate agents, 4 or 5 drunken college students on the cruise ship, and just a bunch of other random people that just decided to get on a Carnival cruise ship and fornicate and drink and do whatever else. But then the ancestors flip that over. Yeah, that's right. The ancestors moving. But yet the ancestors ain't go pay Joe Biden a visit. The ancestors ain't go see Vladimir Putin. The ancestors ain't go see Angela Merkel or anybody else. It's world leaders that's putting down laws and ethics that's oppressing you. But our ancestors, the children of Israel, cried out to Almighty Yahweh in the midst of their oppression. They managed to find their peace. Even being under that type of pressure, they still found enough peace to take time to pray and ask Yahweh to move against their adversaries. And they can do nothing but wait on Yahweh. And Yahweh showed himself throughout this whole time, fighting and moving on their behalf. We're going further here. Jump on in, leave Jasher chapter 76. We're going on here into Jasher chapter 78. We go up here. We see now Yahweh starts intensifying or accelerating the pace, whereby he's now beginning to punish, sure enough, and move throughout the land of Egypt on the behalf of his people. Give me 1 second, Yisrael. In fact, we jump out of Jasher chapter 78 and jump here into 79 now, just to accelerate the pace so as to not keep you here too long. We jump into this 79th chapter now where Yahweh's moving now. Moshe and Aaron, they grown now. They up in size now. Moshe ain't that little boy no more that snatched the crown off the king's head. But him and Aaron, they done had some back and forth trips and visits to Pharaoh to speak up on the behalf of Yahweh's people. Sort of like the people do today where, if you will, imagine the lobbyists, how they go to Congress certain times of the year, or they go before Senate to appeal certain things or to have certain laws put in place. Moshe and Aaron going back and forth to Pharaoh, pleading on the behalf of Yisrael, demanding that Pharaoh let Yahweh's people go. And every time they go, Pharaoh, nah, let them go. Nah, you want to go pray? You want to go worship? Apparently you ain't got enough work to do. You want to go and worship? Oh, no, nope, not at all. You go here into Jasher chapter 79. Now I'm started this 20th verse. No, started verse 19, I'm sorry. And Moshe and Aaron came to Egypt, to the community of the children of Israel, and they spoke to them the words of Yahweh. And the people rejoiced, an exceedingly great rejoicing. And Moshe and Aaron got up early on the next day. Wasn't sleeping 11:30, 12 o'clock. They wasn't late. They wasn't just dragging in whenever. And they rose up early on the next day, and they went to the house of Pharaoh, and they took in their hands the stick of Yahweh. And when they came to the king's gate, 2 young lions were confined there with iron instruments, and no person went out or came in from before them, unless those who the king ordered to come in. And when the conjurers came and they withdrew the lions by their incantations, thus did they bring those persons to the king. So the lions was there at the gate. So you didn't just bust up in there no any kind of way unless the lions tore the fur off of you, and then you didn't get past the lions unless they gave you the go-ahead. And they suppressed the lions' anger and rage or what have you, and they reined them in. But gets interesting. Then Moshe, he hastened, and he lifted up the stick before the lions, and he loosed them. And Moshe and Aaron came into the king's house, and the lions also came with them in joy and followed them and rejoiced as a dog rejoices over his master when he comes in from the field. Now, you see the power that Yahweh placed upon these men, right? Now, they got the defensive measures. These would be today, they would dub them security measures. So they got the 2 lions at the gate right there. Moshe and Aaron come in with the staff of Yahweh, with the stick of Yahweh, raise the staff up. Suddenly the lions are loosed from their posts. These 2 men, they go on in past the gates, past the conjurers and everybody else, walk straight on in, and then the lions being loosed from the iron instruments. Now they come on in behind Moshe and Aaron. They come on in, and then the lions come in, they rejoicing as if they were dogs coming in behind their master, happy to see him. And when Pharaoh saw this thing, he was astonished at it. He was greatly terrified at the report, for their appearance was like the appearance of the children of Elohim. And Pharaoh said to Moses, "What do you require?" And they answered him, saying, "Yahweh, the Elohim of the Hebrews, has sent us to you to say, send forth my people that they may serve me." And when Pharaoh heard their words, he was greatly terrified before them. And he says unto them, "Go today and come back to me tomorrow." And they did according to the word of the king. And when they had gone, Pharaoh sent for Balaam the magician, and Jannes and Jambres his sons, and to all the magicians and conjurers and counselors which belonged to the king. And they all came and sat before the king. And the king told them all the words which Moshe and his brother Aaron had spoken unto them. And the magician said to the king, "But how came these men to you on account of their lions, which were confined at the gate?" And the king said, "Because they lifted up their rod against the lions and loosed them. And they came to me. And the lions also rejoiced at them, as a dog rejoices to see his master." Now the king got to tell his own men, now his own staff, "Hey man, well look, how they get in here? If they got lions at the gate, how was they able to get past?" "Well, they came in, they raised the staff, and the staff unleashed the lions, and the lions came in. Man, it was like watching dogs happy to see their own master, man. It was unbelievable. That's how they did it." And Balaam, the son of Beor, answered the king, saying, "These are none else like the magicians themselves." So in other words, now, hey, these ain't no ordinary dudes here. They ain't like your magicians. There's something different about them. "Now therefore send for them, and let them come, and we'll try them." And the king did so. And in the morning Pharaoh sent for Moses and Aaron to come before the king. And they took the rod of Elohim, and they came to the king and spoke to him, saying, "Thus saith Yahweh, the Elohim of the Hebrews, send my people, that they may serve me." And the king said to them, "But who believe you that you are the messengers of Yahweh, and that you come to me by his orders?" And I'm like, who really believe you? You say you messengers of Yahweh, but who really believe you, man? How we know you ain't lying? "Now therefore give a wonder or a sign on this matter, and then the words which you speak will believe you." So now we're all right, man. Look, y'all don't seem credible enough to us. Look, do something great. Prove to us that you the servants of Yahweh, and that he sent you to get these people. Show me something. As if the lions wasn't enough. And Aaron hastened, and he threw down the rod out of his hand before Pharaoh and before his servants, and the rod turned into a serpent. And the sorcerers saw this, and they each man cast his rod upon the ground, and they became serpents. And the serpent of Aaron's rod lifted up his head and opened his mouth to swallow the rods of the magicians. And Balaam, he answered and said, this thing has been from the days of old, that a serpent should swallow its fellow, and that living things should devour one another. So, man, you ain't done nothing slick. You can throw down your rod and it turn into a snake, and then their rods turn into snakes, and your rod bite them. Man, that's old, man. It ain't nothing, man. It's been happening since the world been spinning. You ain't done nothing slick. Now, therefore, restore it to a rod as it was at the first, and we'll also restore our rods as they were at the first. And if your rods shall swallow our rods, then shall we know that the Spirit of Yahweh is in you. And if not, you are only an artificer or a magician like unto ourselves. And Aaron hastened, and he stretched forth his hand, and he caught hold of the serpent's tail, and it became a rod in his hand. And the sorcerers did the same with their rods, and they got hold, each man of the tail of his serpent, and they became rods at the first. And when they restored their rods, the rod of Aaron swallowed up their rods. And when the king saw this, he ordered the books of the records that related to the kings of Egypt to be brought. And they brought the book of records, the chronicles of the kings of Egypt, in which all the idols of Egypt were inscribed. See, they had a god for every day of the year. So they go on, hey, man, look. They say they serving Yahweh. Go get the books. Go get the records. Get the book. Check the book. Surely Yahweh got to be in the book. Surely he got to be written down here in this book. But you don't find Yahweh in the book, because Yahweh is not an idol. So you ain't going to find him in the book of all the idols and the gods of Egypt. And so, for they thought of themselves to find the name of Yahweh, but they didn't find it. And Pharaoh said to Moses and Aaron, behold, I have not found the name of your Elohim written in this book, and his name I know not. And the counselors and the wise men answered the king, we've heard that the Elohim of the Hebrews is the son of the wise, the son of ancient kings. And Pharaoh turned to Moses and Aaron and said to them, I know not Yahweh, who you've declared, neither will I send this people. So now this is where Pharaoh's heart gets hard. I ain't heard of no Yahweh. I don't know him. I don't know nothing about him. And I ain't letting y'all leave either. And they answered and said to the king, Yahweh, the Elohim of Sabaoth, Yahweh, the Elohim of hosts, is his name. And he proclaimed his name over us from the days of our ancestors and sent us, saying to Pharaoh, go and say unto him, send my people, that they may serve me. Now therefore send us, that we may take a journey for 3 days in the wilderness, and that we may sacrifice before him from the days of our going down to Egypt. Has he not taken from our hands either burnt offering, oblation, or sacrifice? And if you will not send us, his anger will be kindled against you, and he will smite Egypt either with the plague or with the sword. So all that time they've been down in Egypt, they haven't offered a sacrifice unto Yahweh at all. That's serious. And Moshe explaining that thing to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh, I haven't heard of Yahweh. I ain't let you go nowhere. Nope, not at all. And Pharaoh says to them, tell me now his power and his might. And they said to him, he created the heaven and the earth, the sea and all their fish. He formed the light, created the darkness, caused rain upon the earth and watered it, made the herbage and the grass to sprout. He created man and beast and the animals of the forest, the fruit, the birds of the air and the fish of the sea. And by his mouth they live and die. So now you go, well, what did he do? This Yahweh, what's so powerful about him? What's so awesome about him? Tell me a little bit about it. So then they go on and they get explaining to him the greatness of Yahweh. And the anger of the king was kindled at their words. And he says to them, but who among all the gods of the nations can do this? My river is my own, and I've made it for myself. And he drove them from him. And he ordered the labor upon Yisrael to be more severe than it was yesterday and before. And Moshe and Aaron went out from the king's presence, and they saw the children of Israel in an evil condition, for the taskmasters had made their labor exceedingly heavy. And can you imagine that? You rise up, you from the tribe of Levi, but you only watch your brethren being mistreated and abused and disrespected because they disobeyed the commands in which you and your fellow tribesmen had given to them to not even form any alliances or enter into any agreements with the Egyptians. So now the most you can do is watch them suffer in agony until the time that Yahweh appoints to deliver them from it. sort of sounds reminiscent of many of us with our family members. When we go and we share with them the things of Almighty Yahweh and we tell them the goodness of Almighty Yahweh, but they buck and rebel and swat you down and get you out their face because they don't want to hear it. But then you start seeing judgment befall them and afflictions hit them. And most you can do, your heart goes out to them, but ain't so much you can do as far as extending your hand because the state in which they in brought it upon themselves. And Pharaoh, he gonna brag to these men about a river and everything else that he's made unto himself. But then Yahweh came back and struck at the river and all the waters of Egypt, turned them all to blood. And Moshe returned to Yahweh and said, why have you ill-treated your people? For since I came to speak to Pharaoh, what you did send me to say, that which I told him, he is exceedingly ill. Use the children of Yisrael. So in other words, now Moshe talking to Yahweh. Yahweh, why are you treating them so bad? Ever since I went to Pharaoh to say what you told me to say, he just treating them worse and worse. Yahweh, why are you doing this to them? And Yahweh said to Moshe, behold, you'll see with an outstretched hand and with heavy plagues, Pharaoh will send the children of Israel from his land. And Moshe and Aaron dwelt among their brethren, the children of Israel in Egypt. And as for the children of Israel, the Egyptians embittered their lives with heavy work, which they imposed upon them. But jumping into this 80th chapter, we see that 2 whole years go by now. And at the end of 2 years, Yahweh sent again Moshe to Pharaoh to bring forth the children of Israel and sent them out of the land of Egypt. And Moshe went and came to the house of Pharaoh, and he spoke to him the words of Yahweh. But Pharaoh would not hearken to the voice of Yahweh. And Yahweh roused his might in Egypt upon Pharaoh and his subjects. And Yahweh smote Pharaoh and his people with very great and sore plague. And this exchange back and forth, let my people go. 2 whole years go by. Back and forth between Moshe and Aaron and Pharaoh. 2 whole years. And in the midst of this 2 whole years, Israel being worked like you wouldn't believe. Children being put to death, murdered, and everything. And then when an Egyptian came to drink water, now he looked into his pitcher, and behold, all the water was turned into blood. Now you start seeing now Yahweh starting to move. Yahweh, sure enough now, getting frustrated and smiting Egypt to get Israel's attention. And in this buildup, you see now where Yahweh, sure enough, moving now. So he's requiting all of the evil that Pharaoh did to those people, coming back now, full circle. And when a woman kneaded her dough and cooked her victuals, their appearance was unto that of blood. And Yahweh sent again and caused all their waters to bring forth frogs. And all the frogs came into the houses of the Egyptians. And when the Egyptians drank, their bellies were filled with frogs. And they danced in their bellies as they dance when they're in the river. See how Yahweh fights? See the need to find peace in knowing who you serve and knowing that Almighty Yahweh, though he might not move at the time that you want him to move, when Yahweh moves against an enemy, don't nobody in the universe move against an enemy like Almighty Yahweh. You done took these people, you done beat them, you done tricked them into joining your labor force, you done sent them off to wars, you done had them fight, you took their babies, you done put plots in motion to separate the mothers from the children, you done put so much pressure on this nation that you broke down the structure of the family to where some of the men forced to leave their wives because there were bounties on the heads of Hebrew male children. Others had to go off and deliver babies in the field, leave the babies in the field. Yahweh was so full of Hasid that he allowed the baby's hair to grow long and the grass of the field to cover the babies, and he provided the babies with smooth stones that fed these babies milk and honey to protect them. But now, all of the dirt that Egypt did to Israel is now coming back home, full circle. Now we're going to see the need for all of us to be able to find peace, even under pressure, because it's an ability to maintain your peace under pressure that Yahweh gives you the greatest levels of clarity and insight and understanding into not just your trials, but also the judgment and the destruction of your enemies. And when you remain calm and you be led by that Ruach HaKodesh, you start to see things much more clearly. Sort of like Elisha the prophet and the young man who was with him. And Elijah asked the young man to open his eyes, and the young man looked up and saw that even though there was a great army against them, there was also an even greater army of Yahweh's angels surrounding them. So in these latter days, we need that type of vision, Yisrael, but we got to stay calm in order to perceive. We don't want to be like the children of Ephraim, jumping the gun and just, this is it. Miscalculations and being off track and ahead of time or too early and ill prepared. And imagine that you go, yeah, this is it. The deliverance is coming. But yet in the midst of this all, it was foretold that the children of Israel would go out from Egypt with great substance. And it was told that they would spoil the Egyptians, but the Ephraimites, they going off, they just take what they had and they just roll out with just silver and gold. No bread, nothing to feed themselves. Then they went out and lost. But going on further, it says now, and all their drinking water and their cooking water turned to frogs. And also when they lay in their beds, their perspiration bred frog. Can you imagine that? It's so into the point where the frogs in your drinking water, the frogs in your food when you use the water to cook, everything, even so much so to the point that your sweat breeds frogs. You ribbit. And all their drinking water and their cooking water, and also when they lay in their beds, their perspiration bred frogs. Notwithstanding all this, the anger of Yahweh did not turn from them, and his hand was stretched out against all the Egyptians to smite them with every plague. And he sent and he smote the dust, the lice, and the lice came into Egypt to the height of 2 cubits upon the earth. Imagine that. Now, if you break down the measurements, a cubit breaks down to about 1.5 feet or 18 inches. But you got 2 cubits of lice, just lice all over the earth, 3 feet high, 36 inches of lice. Now, I don't know about nobody else, but there ain't no condition I want to be living under. And just think, that wasn't even the half of it. Yahweh turned the dust to lice, smote them with the lice reached to the height of 2 cubits upon the earth. And the lice were also very numerous in the flesh of man and beast and all the inhabitants of Egypt. Also upon the king and the queen, Yahweh sent this lice, and it grieved Egypt exceedingly on the account of the lice. But notwithstanding this, the anger of Yahweh didn't turn away, and his hand was still stretched out over Egypt. And Yahweh sent all kinds of beasts into the field of Egypt, and they came and destroyed all of Egypt, man and beast, and trees, and all the things that were in Egypt. And Yahweh sent fiery serpents, scorpions, mice, weasels, toads, together with others creeping in the dust, flies, hornets, fleas, bugs, gnats, each swarm according to its kind. Now you got all of this going on. And the children of Israel still waiting to be delivered, while simultaneously watching the judgment of Yahweh fall upon their enemies and their oppressors. And all the reptiles and winged animals according to their kind came to Egypt, and they grieved the Egyptians exceedingly. And the fleas and the flies came into the eyes and the ears of the Egyptians. And the hornet came upon them and drove them away, and they removed it from in their inner rooms, and it pursued them. And when the Egyptians hid themselves on the account of the swarm of the animals, they locked their doors after them. And Yahweh ordered the Sulanoth, or the sea monster, the creatures under the earth that people make up and fantasize what they look like. Those creatures way down, 20,000 leagues under the sea, all those different creatures below where man goes and explores, places that Jacques Cousteau hasn't been to explore. Yahweh went and called forth the Sulanoth, which was in the sea, to come and go into Egypt. And she had long arms, 10 cubits in length of the cubit of a man. Now that's serious. Can you imagine monstrosity come forth out of the sea with arms or tentacles that long, 10 cubits? And then she went forth upon the roofs, and she uncovered the rafting and the flooring and cut them and stretched forth her arm into the house. Now imagine that, something come out the sea, get a hold of your house and just scale your house and peel back the rafting of the roof in your house. Because you're thinking, all right, they got all kinds of plagues and flies and lice and everything. I'm going to go in the house, I'm going to shut the door, and everything be over, and I'll be safe. But then Yahweh summons a creature from the sea that comes on in and peels back the roof of your home. And afterward came the swarm of animals into the houses of Egypt, and the swarms of animals destroyed the Egyptians, and it grieved them exceedingly. But notwithstanding this, the anger of Yahweh did not turn away from the Egyptians, and his hand was yet stretched forth against them. And Yahweh sent the pestilence, and the pestilence pervaded Egypt into the horses and the asses, and the camels, and the herds of oxen, and sheep, and in man. And when the Egyptians rose up early in the morning to take their cattle to pasture, they found all their cattle dead. And there remained of the cattle of the Egyptians only 1 in 10. And of the cattle belonging to Yisrael and Goshen, not one died. And Yahweh sent forth a burning inflammation in the flesh of the Egyptians, which burst their skins, and it became a severe itch in all the Egyptians from the soles of their feet to the crowns of their heads. And many boils were in their flesh, that their flesh wasted away until they became rotten and putrid. See how Yahweh fights? And Yahweh sent a very hasty hail. Now you got all of this going on. And just imagine, put yourself in the state of the Egyptians for a moment. You got all kinds of insects, creeping beasts, all the little winged insects and everything. You got serpents, mice, all of the animals that vex and annoy people. They all decide, hey, look, we're going to have a convention in Egypt. And you got the water being turned to blood, frogs everywhere, people, cattle dropping dead and everything. And still more plagues to come. And then you got boils and you got sores and things in your skin. And then you look up and you see your neighbor with the same thing. And then you look up and you see your neighbor over here and over there and the whole nation smitten. But then you look at your cattle and all of them, 1 out of 10 survive. But then these people who you hate and despise, you look up and you see them. They doing all right. Nothing hit them. Nothing impacted them at all. And also the men and the beasts that were found abroad, they perished of the flames and the fire from the hail. And also the young lions were exhausted. And Yahweh sent and brought forth numerous locusts into Egypt. And then the Egyptians rejoiced at the locusts, although they consumed the produce of the field, and they caught them in abundance and salted them for food. Now you're going to find a silver lining in the cloud now. All this chaos going on, but yet you get happy and excited because of the locusts. Even though the locusts ate up all your food, you get excited that, well, hey, look, they ate up everything. Well, look, we're going to eat them up. So then you put salt on them and you season them. And Yahweh turned the mighty wind of the sea, which took away all the locusts. So just that fast, you get excited. You get pumped up. Yeah, all right, okay, yeah, fine. All right, y'all done ate up everything. We'll put a little salt on y'all. And Yahweh come along, send the wind. Nope, not so. See, even Yahweh has a sense of humor. And Yahweh turned the mighty wind of the sea, which took away all the locusts, even those that were salted, and thrusted them into the Red Sea. And not one locust remained within the boundaries of Egypt. And Yahweh sent darkness upon the earth, that the whole land of Egypt and Pathros had became dark for 3 days, so that a man could not see his hand when he lifted it to his mouth. Then jumping down here into this chapter, right after the darkness, Yahweh says unto the children of Israel, celebrate your feasts and make your Passover. For behold, I come in the midst of the night amongst all the Egyptians, and I'll smite all their firstborn, from the firstborn of man to the firstborn of beasts. And when I see you, I'll pass over. And the children of Israel did according to all that Yahweh had commanded Moshe and Aaron. Now, can you imagine, had those rebellious Israelites that had been buried in the midst of the 3 days of darkness, can you imagine, had they been alive to see all of this, they probably would have turned on the children of Israel. Man, y'all done brought all this chaos down on us, man. Y'all come in here with this nonsense, messing stuff up. Man, everything was cool. And then we ain't got no food to eat because of y'all. Can you imagine the mindset, had they not perished in the 3 days of darkness? They probably, I'm not killing no lamb. Nope. They would probably been the first to organize and form Peter. They probably would have formed the people for ethical treatment of animals. Well, I'm not sacrificing no lamb. So what? No, nope. As you know us as a people, when we rebel, we rebel. We go all out in our rebellion. And it came to pass that in the middle of the night, that Yahweh went forth in the midst of Egypt and smote all the firstborn of the Egyptians, from the firstborn of man to the firstborn of beasts. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians. And there was a great cry throughout Egypt in that night, for there was not a house in which there was not a corpse. And can you imagine that? And if you've ever had the displeasure of hearing, particularly a mother, fathers mourn their children and they mourn their losses, but it's a different sound when you hear a mother mourn the loss of a son, especially of a son that's been murdered. That's a different type of cry there. That cry gets at your soul and tugs at your heartstrings in a different way. But can you imagine that being all throughout the nation? You hear that cry simultaneously in unison, and it ain't like it's lasting a couple minutes, but it's going on all throughout the night and on into the day as people wake up and realize that they lost one in the house, those people over there lost one, to where whole blocks and towns and sections of a city, to where a whole nation, as the scriptures just says, there was not one house in Egypt where there was not a corpse, and then it even spills over to the animal world. Also, the likenesses of the firstborn of Egypt, which were carved in the walls of their houses, were destroyed and fell to the ground. So if you were to update that today, imagine, not only did the firstborn in all of Egypt die from man and beast, but even if you were to just put a picture or a little statue made in the image of Demonte or Keon or Mike, or you know the names that we give our children, even pictures of the firstborn knocked to the ground. Yahweh was not playing. Can you imagine that, how heartbreaking that had to be for those people? You look up and you realize, oh, wow, I done lost my baby. Oh, he done died. Then you look up, you see the little image that you might have made of them or an engraving of them that you made in the wall. Even that's brought to the ground. Yahweh was not playing. He came back to fight and he rode for Yisrael. He meant business. Even the bones of their firstborn who had died before this, and whom they had buried in their houses, was raked up by the dogs of Egypt on that night and dragged before the Egyptians and cast before them. I mean, we had a dog years ago, and the dog went out one day, and the dog, he went and did his business in the yard, and the dog took a piece of his excrement and he brought it back into the house to Ima Yacobi as if to say, look, and we always made the joke, he brought it back as if to say, look, I made this for you. And you imagine the dogs in Egypt doing that same thing to their masters or their owners? Children who had died long before this plague, but then suddenly the dogs go in the earth, digging, and unearth the bones or the skeletal remains of the firstborn and come forth and bring those to the owner. Yahweh wasn't playing at all. And it's the same Elohim that we serve today. So in the midst of all of our trials and afflictions, hey, we ain't got no choice but to keep calm and wait on Yahweh. In the midst of all the chaos unfolding around us, we got no choice but to find shalom and knowing that we serve Yahweh and that Yahweh is capable of bringing forth this same type of deliverance for us. And upon our adversaries, he's able to bring forth the same type of judgment and destruction that he brought upon ancient Egypt in the days of old. And all the families of Egypt wept upon that night, each man for his son and each man for his daughter, being the firstborn. And the tumult of Egypt was heard at a distance on that night. So imagine that, outside the borders of Egypt. Imagine something so horrific to where if you, let's say you in Baltimore, and something like that was to break out in Baltimore on the account of the children of Israel here. But the noise and the grief is just so loud that the folks all the way down 295 in D.C. or in Capitol Heights hear it. And they, man, what in the world going on? And it just gets that loud the way it just travels that much to where folks down in Owens Mills, they hear the chaos. They hear it. Folks down on the other side of 295 in Glen Burnie, going toward Arundel Mills, look up and they hear this cry come from the city. Then we're going on further. It says here that the tumult of Egypt was heard at a distance. And Bethiah, the daughter of Pharaoh, she went forth with the king on that night to seek Moshe and Aaron. Now this was Moshe's caretaker. Now she was bringing up Moshe from a child. So she was given to him and she raised him as if she were his mother. But then now her and Pharaoh, they get together. No, we're going to go find them. Now where they at? We're going to go look for them. No, they got some explaining to do. They're going to talk to us about this. Now they go forward, her and the king, on that night to seek Moses and Aaron in their houses. And they found them in their houses, eating and drinking and rejoicing with all Yisrael. So now they mad. And of course, they come to the house. They mad. They look up and they find these people who they deem lower class citizens, not worthy of respect. These people whose lives they do not value. But in the midst of all of the chaos unfolding in Egypt, you find your servants rejoicing, having a good old time. But then you get there and you look up, see all of them eating and drinking. And Matthias said to Moses, is this the reward for the good which I've done unto you, who reared you and stretched you out? And you brought this evil upon me and my house? And in other words, so this how you pay me back. I done raised you since you was a child. And this how you do me? You do this to me? So now Moshe says to her, surely 10 plagues did Yahweh bring upon Egypt. But did any evil accrue to you from any of them? So now Moshe, she come in, she thinking she's saying something slick. Moshe answered, had just a good enough answer for her. Hey, look, all these different plagues that Yahweh brought upon Egypt, did any of the evil come upon you? Did any one of them affect you? And she said, no. And Moshe said to her, although you are the firstborn to your mother, you shall not die, and no evil shall reach you in the midst of Egypt. And she said, well, what advantage to me is this? When I see the king, my brother, and all his household and the subjects in this evil, whose firstborn perished with all their firstborn of Egypt. And Moshe says to her, surely your brother and his household and subjects, the family of Egypt, would not hearken to the words of Yahweh. Therefore did this evil come upon them. So now, well, okay, your brother, the king, his family, all of Egypt, y'all ain't even care about what Almighty Yahweh had to say to do for Yisrael. So in turn, this is why that judgment is coming upon them. So in turn, they got what they deserve. They earned that. Brought this upon themselves. And Moshe says to her, your brothers, they did not listen to Yahweh. Therefore did this evil come upon them. And Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, approached Moshe and Aaron and some of the children of Israel who were with them in that place. And he prayed to them, saying, rise up, take your brother and all the children of Israel who are in the land with their sheep and their oxen, and all belonging to them. They shall leave nothing remaining. Only pray for me to Yahweh your Elohim. So, hey, look, all y'all got to go. You got to get out of here now. Don't leave nothing behind. Get out. When you leave, say a prayer to Yahweh. Or they say, send one up for me. See how Yahweh rose up and fought on the behalf of his people? And in the midst of it all, the key to realize, the thing to remember, let us all, no matter what, remain steadfast and holding on to Yahweh's unchanging hand. Let us not lose focus or sight of the fact that we serve the creator of heaven above, the earth beneath, and everything in it. Let us rejoice and find peace in the fact that Yahweh is still on the throne. And it's going to come forward, and all the world is going to be made to recognize his presence upon the throne. So whatever trials befall us, even at this time of the year, still find that peace, even while being put under intense pressure and scrutiny. Yisrael, let us stand. Almighty Father, we come before you ever so humbly in the name of your Son, Yahshua HaMashiach, giving praise and hosannas unto your Kodesh name. We told you for bringing us to this point in the year and allowing us to see the emergence of another Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And we ask of you to please continually watch over us, protect us as we go to our homes, and allow us to be able to lie down and sleep in comfort and great peace. And Abba Yahweh, we ask of you to grant us the ability to arise tomorrow, to give even more praises unto your Kodesh name. Father Yahweh, we ask of you to please watch over all of your people wheresoever they are throughout the world. Protect us, heal us, guide us every step of the way, Father, from now until we are ushered into your kingdom to see your blessed face in peace. Abba Yahweh, we ask these things of you ever so humbly. In the name of Yahshua HaMashiach we pray. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Shalom, Yisrael. Shalom.